An 11-year-old coder walks through Willowbrook Park. Minutes later, he's in cuffs pepper-sprayed by a cop with 12 years on the force. His father, a high-ranking FBI assistant director, racing from a secure briefing. Why did a quiet shortcut explode into a town-shaking reckoning seen by 3 million in one-day watch? To uncover the bonuses, the blue wall, and the break. Subscribe, like, and share to push this story further. The afternoon sunlight slanted across the brick courtyard of Lakeside Middle School at exactly 3:15 p.m. when Micah Pierce, just 11 years old, pushed open the heavy side door with his shoulder and stepped out into the kind of air that made the world feel new. His backpack sagged off one shoulder, weighed down with maybe 3 kilograms of books and a silver laptop, but it felt lighter than it had that morning. He had just finished presenting his coding club demo, a clean, cheerful budgeting app that helped kids track allowance and chores, and he had crushed it. No bugs, no crashes, no awkward pauses. When the pie chart animated perfectly at the end, the room of 12 kids and one teacher had burst into applause like he'd just scored a game-winning shot. His teacher, Ms. Carraway, had leaned down with a grin and said, "Micah, you need to submit this to the state STEM competition. Top 5 get scholarships." He had nodded, trying not to beam, though his ears were warm with pride. For a moment, as he walked past the line of buses with their idling diesel hum, he let himself imagine his app on real phones, his name on a certificate, maybe even his photo on the school website. He could already picture his mom's proud tears and his dad's subtle approving nod, the kind of nod that meant more than a high five. He checked the time on his phone, 3:17 p.m. He usually walked home in 14 minutes. If he took his usual shortcut through Willowbrook Park, he could shave off 3. The neighborhood of Maple Ridge, Maryland, stood as a postcard of suburban comfort. Wide streets lined with tulip trees, perfect lawns cut to the centimeter, and SUVs parked in driveways like showroom models. It was, ironically, the very reason his parents had chosen it. His father, Assistant Director Langston Pierce of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, believed that safety could be planned like a mission. His mother, Ava Pierce, a formidable civil rights attorney, had believed it too, at least enough to leave the city behind. But Micah never thought of any of that when he walked home. He thought about code. He passed the corner market with the chalkboard sign promising $2 lemon ices and the barber shop where old men argued about the Orioles. The concrete was warm under his sneakers, giving back the sun in small stored doses. He moved in that loose-limbed way of kids who have no idea how tense adults are. At 3:20 p.m., he reached the green-painted iron gate of Willowbrook Park, pushed it open, and stepped inside. Willowbrook lay like a soft rectangle of calm in the middle of Maple Ridge, 3 hectares of clipped grass, winding paths, and a thin silver creek running through the center. The air cooled as he entered. To his left, the basketball court echoed with rubber squeaks and shouted scores, 9-9 game to 11 win by 2. To his right, the playground sang with the chaotic music of childhood swings, squeaking laughter, spiking someone crying because someone else got the red bucket. He stayed on the main asphalt path, the one that curved from the north gate to the south exit, like a lazy letter C. Micah checked his phone one more time, not for messages, just to admire the spinning gear icon he had coded himself. It rotated exactly once when tapped. Exactly 1 second. Not too much. Clean. He imagined telling his dad about it at dinner, grilled chicken brown rice, 1 scoop of mint chip afterward. His dad always cared about the details, and Micah liked that. He walked at about 4 kilometers per hour, steady, relaxed. He nodded to people as he passed a dad tying a toddler's shoelace, a girl from his math class pushing her little brother on the swing, a woman jogging who looked like she was winning some private battle with herself. He made eye contact the way his parents had taught him because visibility could be a kind of shield. Always be seen, always be calm, always be polite. He was 30 meters from the footbridge when he caught the smell of cut grass mixing with warm mulch, and the breeze shifted against his hoodie. He thought about changing the name of the app's Save Jar function to Pocket Jar, because it sounded friendlier. He was composing that thought when someone began watching him. Caitlin Rowe sat on the central bench by the sandbox, expensive sunglasses reflecting the bright grass, like two polished coins. She was 43, a real estate agent who had moved into Maple Ridge barely 6 months earlier, but spoke in the neighborhood group chat as if she had founded it. She had already reported 3 suspicious people since January, 2 black teenagers walking home from the high school, and 1 Latino delivery driver who had stopped to check directions. None had done anything. None had been charged. But her messages were written in the careful vocabulary of concern, just being cautious, better safe than sorry, which meant people praised her for vigilance instead of naming her fear. Micah came into her line of sight like a shadow crossing a porch. Black boy, gray hoodie, backpack. Phone in his hand for 2 seconds, then back in his pocket. He didn't stop. He didn't linger. He didn't glance at the playground. He walked like what he was, a child on his way home. But Caitlin's gaze stuck. She told herself she wasn't prejudiced, just perceptive. She told herself she had a responsibility. She told herself this even though she couldn't name what exactly seemed off about him besides his skin. Her hand hovered over her phone. Micah had already reached the footbridge, a short wooden arch crossing the creek water, maybe ankle-deep and glinting like broken mirror pieces. He slowed for a moment to watch tiny whirlpools curl around stones. He thought about adding a confetti animation to the app's goal-achieved screen, something subtle. Half a second of celebration, not tacky. Caitlin watched him from 20 meters away, heart ticking faster as if proximity equaled danger. Her sunglasses slid down her nose. She pushed them back up. She could still see the playground behind him, could still hear the sing-song shrieks of toddlers who had never had to think about who might fear them. She pulled out her phone. The time was 3:24 p.m. Micah had been in the park for 180 seconds. Caitlin spoke into the phone in a whisper, as if secrecy made it true. "Hi, yes, I'd like to report something suspicious. There's a black boy, maybe a teenager, just hanging around the playground, circling it. He's been watching the kids for about 15 minutes. Her words were precise and false. He had not circled. He had not watched. He had simply walked straight through. But a fabricated number sounds like fact. 15 minutes. Long enough to feel deliberate. Long enough to trigger response. The dispatcher asked questions. Caitlin answered smoothly. Gray hoodie, black jeans, backpack, hands in pockets. He had none in his pockets. She gave the location by the south path near the sandbox. She ended the call, slid her phone back into her purse, and exhaled like she had finished a duty. Micah stepped off the bridge, the south exit in sight just 70 meters away. 2 minutes to the street, 3 to home. He adjusted his strap-switching shoulders and felt the familiar pull on his right collarbone. He was thinking about telling his mom how Ms. Carraway had said top 5 get travel vouchers when the first faint echo of a siren whispered at the edge of the air, still too far to place, still ignorable. He didn't know yet that this was the moment the clock split his life into before and after. Caitlin smoothed the sleeve of her blazer and picked up her real estate folder. She glanced at her watch. 3:26 p.m. She would make the 4 o'clock showing if she left now. Behind her, a police cruiser turned off Brentwood Avenue lights. Dark sirens silent, moving fast, 200 meters, in under 20 seconds. Inside it, Officer Trevor Maddox tightened his grip on the wheel. The dispatch call was only 37 words long, but he had already decided what he believed. And Micah kept walking 11 years old, 70 meters from the exit, with the sunlight still perfect on his face, unaware that a stranger's fear had just summoned danger to his name. The cruiser glided to the curb like a shark sliding through still water, the tires crunching the gravel edge of the park path. 3:27 p.m. The soft murmur of Willowbrook Park snapped into silence, the way sound cuts when someone presses. Pause. Officer Trevor Maddox, 12 years on the Maple Ridge Police Department, swung his door open before the car had fully stopped, one boot on the asphalt, one gloved hand on his belt. He was 38, broad-shouldered, and wore his reputation like armor, strict, unbending, convinced that fear was the cleanest tool for keeping order. The department called him reliable. His colleagues called him the Wall. He called himself realistic. Micah had just reached the bend near the south exit, no more than 50 meters from the gate, when Maddox's voice cracked through the air like a starter pistol. "Hey, you stop right there!" The words hit Micah's spine like cold water. He froze mid-step, his sneakers squeaking slightly against the path, as if they were reluctant to stop. His father's voice, soft but firm from that talk they'd had the year he turned 10, surfaced instantly in his mind. "If you're ever stopped by police, stay calm. Move slowly. Keep your hands visible. Say yes, sir. Or yes, ma'am." Micah turned carefully, hands at his sides, palms outward, just enough to be seen. "Yes, officer," he said, and the words trembled only slightly, like paper in wind. Maddox stalked toward him, with heavy, deliberate steps, his hand already resting on the black polymer holster at his right hip. The playground 20 meters behind them had gone still. The children, quiet, parents, staring. The rhythmic squeak of the swings stopped. A basketball thumped once, on the court, rolled and fell silent. "What are you doing here?" Maddox demanded. His voice carried hard-edged the tone of someone who had already decided something was wrong. "ID. Now." Micah blinked, confusion flickering across his face. I'm walking home from school, sir. I live on Hawthorne Street. I'm 11, so I don't have ID yet." He swallowed. "I just came from coding club." "Coding club," Maddox repeated like it was a foreign word. His eyes narrowed to hard slits. "We got a call about someone matching your description, watching children. Acting suspicious." The word suspicious landed like a brick. Micah felt the heat of eyes pressing on him from all directions, now parents, older kids, strangers. A woman pulled her toddler a few steps closer to her bench. A man near the basketball court raised his phone discreetly, already recording. Micah shook his head, still steady, still careful. "I wasn't watching anyone. I was just walking home, sir." "Empty your backpack," Maddox snapped. Micah hesitated, then remembered, always comply. "Don't argue. It's just books and my laptop," he said softly. "If you want, I can call my dad. He's FBI. He can." That was the spark. Maddox's body reacted before his mind seemed to. His eyes flashed. His stance shifted wide, and in one sharp motion his hand left his holster, not for his gun, but for the canister clipped beside it. The black metal cylinder hissed as his thumb depressed the trigger. A thin orange stream of OC pepper spray cut the air like a line of fire. It hit Micah square in the eyes from barely half a meter away. The burn was instantaneous and absolute. It was fire and acid and lightning all at once. Micah screamed a high, raw sound that ripped from his throat and dropped to his knees. His hands clawed at his face, making it worse, the chemicals spreading across his skin into his mouth, his nose. Tears and mucus burst from him, involuntarily pouring like taps had been opened behind his eyes. "Stop resisting," Maddox barked. Micah wasn't resisting. He was trying to breathe. Down on the ground, now. He was already on the ground. But Maddox grabbed his left arm anyway, twisting it hard behind his back with a torque meant for grown men twice Micah's size. Something popped in his shoulder. The asphalt was hot against his cheek. He tasted copper. His body tried to curl, but Maddox's knee pinned his small back to the ground with the weight of an adult man nearly 90 kilograms pressing on barely 35. I'm not! Micah gasped, choking on pepper spray and snot. Maddox wrenched his right arm back, clamped the cuff around his thin wrist, then the left. The metal dug deep into soft skin, not built for it. He cinched them too tight, the ratchet clicks sharp in the silence. A woman's voice rose from the bench. "He's just a kid." A man added, "You're hurting him." "Back up," Maddox barked without looking up. "Officer safety protocol." Phones were out now, 6, 7, 8 parents, maybe more. The click whir of video, starting the small blinking red dots of live recording. Micah's face was a blur of red and tears and streaming chemical sheen. His breath came in short, ragged bursts. He tried to remember his father's words about badge numbers, about staying calm, about surviving first, fighting later. He blinked through the agony, through the orange haze in his vision, and locked onto the shiny rectangle on Maddox's chest badge number 2319. He whispered it in his mind like a chant, 2319, 2319. Maddox hauled him to his feet with a sharp yank on the cuffs, ignoring the way Micah's small body stumbled and sagged. The boy's shoes scraped the pavement. His knees barely worked. He could barely see his eyelids' swollen lashes clumped from the chemical spray. "I can't see," Micah rasped. "Please!" "Quiet," Maddox snapped. He pushed him toward the cruiser, one hand clamped on the chain between the cuffs. From somewhere behind, a woman's voice rang out, shrill and furious. "I'm calling internal affairs right now. He's 11. Then teach him not to act like a threat," Maddox threw over his shoulder. Micah blinked again, desperate, and through the sting saw 3 police cars' reflections in the silver curve of a parked SUV, realizing dimly they were just the one car mirrored and refracted. The world wobbled like heat haze. His phone was still in his pocket, pressing against his thigh. If you can record everything his dad had said once. His fingers twitched. Somehow, awkward and clumsy with the cuffs biting, he nudged the phone halfway out, thumbed the side button to open the camera, and aimed it just long enough to snap a blurred photo of Maddox's badge. "Stop reaching," Maddox barked. Micah started. Maddox shoved him hard, slamming him into the cruiser's rear door frame so the metal thudded against his shoulder. The phone slipped from his numb fingers, clattering to the ground. A parent surged forward like they might grab it, but stopped short when Maddox's free hand twitched toward his holster. "Get back," Maddox warned. "You're on camera," someone shouted. "Good," Maddox snarled. "You'll see I followed protocol." He yanked the rear door open, shoved Micah inside like stowing baggage, and slammed it shut. The door's solid clunk felt final like a vault. Through the smudged glass, Micah saw only shapes, now blobs of color, the blur of grass and sky, his own reflection like a ghost. His chest hitched. His eyes burned like live coals. He could still taste pepper in the back of his throat, bitter and electric. Somewhere far away, 10 meters 20, someone's voice was saying, "He said he's FBI's kid." "Did you hear him say that?" And another voice was answering, "They all say that." Maddox walked back to the driver's seat slowly, like a man satisfied he had fixed a problem. At 3:32 p.m., the cruiser pulled away from Willowbrook Park tires, crunching over the same gravel where they had arrived 5 minutes earlier. Parents stood frozen phones, raised mouths, open eyes wide, watching the silence rush back in behind the car like water filling a hole. And inside that car, blind and burning and handcuffed Micah Pierce was already becoming a story none of them would be able to forget. At 3:47 p.m., Assistant Director Langston Pierce stood at the head of a walnut conference table in a secured sublevel of the J. Edgar Hoover Building, 28 meters below ground, reviewing the final operational plan for a joint counterintelligence sweep that had taken 3 years to build. He had served 22 years in federal service, first as an Army intelligence officer deployed twice to Eastern Europe, and then as the FBI's quiet prodigy who rose faster than anyone thought possible. He wore that rise like he wore his Navy suit, crisp, composed, and understated enough to survive the politics. 12 senior agents were seated around him, screens aglow with digital maps of 6 suspected Russian sleeper cells. The air smelled faintly of paper and machine-cooled oxygen, the kind that dried your throat if you stayed too long. "Remember," he said, tapping the stylus against a glowing node on the map, "we move at all 6 sites simultaneously, or not at all. No partial triggers, no leaks. One misstep, and 3 years of surveillance vaporize in 3 minutes." His voice was measured, the kind of calm that made people obey. In his pocket, his phone buzzed once, then again, vibrating against the inner lining of his suit like a trapped wasp. He ignored it. Phones were never allowed on during secure briefings, and Langston Pierce never broke protocol. It was why he had become one of the highest-ranking black officials in the FBI, a rarity who survived, not by softening, but by sharpening. The vibration came again, this time 3 sharp pulses in under 2 seconds. That pattern, urgent. He paused mid-sentence. "Take 10, everyone," he said, his tone even but his gut tightening. "Review the dossier on Site Delta." He left the room without looking hurried. In this building, speed made people nervous. In the corridor's fluorescent hush, he pulled the phone out. 7 missed calls. 3 from Lakeside Middle School, 2 from his wife, Ava Pierce, 1 from their neighbor, Renee Carter, and 1 from an unfamiliar local number. A single text glared at him from Renee. "Is this Micah Police at Willowbrook Park?" He tapped it. A grainy 42-second clip filled the screen Maddox's hulking frame. A boy half his size screaming. The hiss of spray. The shape on the ground was small and convulsing and screaming with a voice Langston knew better than his own heartbeat. Micah. For a fraction of a second, everything in Langston's body went weightless. Then his training kicked in like a second skeleton snapping into place. He called Ava. She answered on the first ring, her voice already tight and deadly calm. "Langston, something's happened to Micah." The school called, he never checked in for aftercare. And Renee said, "I saw it," he said, cutting her off without meaning to. "Where is he?" "They won't tell me. I called the Maple Ridge Police Department. They said they can't confirm if they have a minor in custody, without a case number. They're giving me the runaround." Langston's voice came out flat and surgical. "I'm leaving now. Stay where you are. Start building the record." "I already have," she said. "I called Judge Henley for an emergency preservation order. I need you to get him to a hospital for documentation before they wipe this clean." "Done," Langston said and hung up. He returned to the briefing room long enough to say to Deputy Director Holloway, "Family emergency. I'll debrief later." Holloway saw something in Langston's eyes, something flint-hard and unshakable, and simply nodded. Langston's secure government SUV was parked 4 levels above. He reached it in 42 seconds flat, swiping through 2 checkpoints with his badge and retinal scan. By 3:55 p.m., the V8 engine roared to life and the vehicle shot east on Constitution Avenue, climbing to 90 kilometers per hour the moment he cleared the security zone. The Potomac blurred past like mercury under sunlight. As the city gave way to Maryland's leafy sprawl, Langston's mind flickered through memories like surveillance stills, the first time he had to sit Micah down for the talk when the boy turned 10. If a police officer stops you, son, keep your hands visible. Move slowly. Say yes, sir. Or yes, ma'am. Don't argue, even if you're right. Don't reach for anything without saying what you're doing. If they arrest you, don't resist. Just remember their name and badge number. We'll handle it later. Micah's face had been puzzled, then worried. But you're FBI. Won't they know I'm your son? They won't, Langston had said quietly, and even if they did, some wouldn't care. Now he wondered if that lesson had saved his son or painted a target on his back. He switched to a secure FBI channel and punched in the Maple Ridge Police Department's command desk, bypassing the public line. The sergeant who answered sounded brisk until Langston identified himself. This is Assistant Director Langston Pierce of the FBI Counterintelligence Division. I need to speak with your watch commander about a juvenile detained at Willowbrook Park within the last hour. The sergeant's tone changed like a switch flipping. One moment, sir. Captain Douglas Vance came on the line. Assistant Director Pierce, how can we assist the Bureau today? Langston's voice was ice. Captain, my son is 11 years old. He was pepper sprayed and taken into custody by one of your officers while walking home from school. I want his name badge number and condition right now, or my next call is to the Civil Rights Division and the U.S. Attorney General's office. A pause. Then, sir. The juvenile was uncooperative and made a sudden movement. Officer Maddox followed standard protocol. He's being processed. Langston's voice cut like wire snapping. If my son is not receiving medical attention by the time I arrive, I will make it my personal mission to dismantle your department piece by piece. Do you understand me? Yes, sir, Vance said faintly. Langston ended the call. He pushed the accelerator down. The speedometer climbed past 120 kilometers per hour. He didn't care. At the same time, 4:11 p.m. Now Ava Pierce stood in the glass-walled conference room of her firm Pierce Carter & Lowe Papers, spread across the table in geometric precision. At 42, she had argued civil rights cases before the Supreme Court 3 times. Judges called her unflappable. Opposing counsel called her surgical. But right now, her hands trembled for the first time in years. On her laptop screen, the same grainy video played in a loop, Maddox towering, spraying, wrenching Micah's tiny wrists into cuffs. She forced herself to watch without looking away. Fear she had learned long ago only grew in the corners you refused to illuminate. Her paralegal hovered in the doorway. Ma'am, Judge Henley approved the emergency preservation order. It's signed and time-stamped. File it now, Ava said, not looking up. And serve copies on the Maple Ridge PD, the county prosecutor, and the Internal Affairs Division. I want their servers locked down before they can delete a single frame of body cam footage. Yes, ma'am. Ava opened a new legal draft, her keystrokes sharp as strikes. Request for preliminary injunction, immediate medical documentation, and civil rights complaint. She cited Section 1983 of the Civil Rights Act, then added federal tort claims. She inserted Micah's full legal name and age, 11 years, 3 months. She listed the potential injuries: chemical burns, ocular trauma, soft tissue damage to wrists, emotional distress. She noted the officer's name, Trevor Maddox, and left a blank for the badge number. Her phone rang. She snatched it up. Langston. 5 minutes out, he said. His voice was a blade. Get him to a hospital, Ava said. Full documentation, photographs, optical scans, injury report, signed by the attending. Don't let the department medically clear him themselves. They'll underreport the injuries. I know, Langston said. I've done this before. There was a pause, not of doubt, but of weight. This time it's our son, Ava whispered. I know, he said again, more quietly. At 4:16 p.m., Langston swung his SUV into the cracked asphalt parking lot of the Maple Ridge Police Department, the vehicle's brakes shrieking softly as they bit. He paused just long enough to reset his face. Rage wouldn't serve him here, not yet. He needed the full force of his authority, not its explosion. Inside the lobby was small, tiled in dull gray with a Blue Lives Matter poster taped crookedly behind the reception glass. The desk sergeant's eyes widened when Langston placed his badge on the counter. "I'm Assistant Director Pierce Langston," said each word a steel block. "My son, Micah Pierce, was brought here from Willowbrook Park less than an hour ago. I will see him now." "Yes, sir," the sergeant said, almost tripping over the phone to call back. As Langston waited, his eyes flicked across the wall of framed department photos. 37 officers, only 2 black faces. Ava's voice echoed in his head. Document everything. And he would. Because they had just made a mistake, they could never unmake harming the child of 2 people who had built their lives dismantling injustice. And the storm coming for them now would carry the weight of both the law and the bloodline they had dared to touch. At 5:29 p.m., while Assistant Director Langston Pierce stood in the fluorescent glare of the Maple Ridge Police Department lobby, demanding to see his son, the video that would turn the town upside down was already on its way to breaking the internet. What had started as a parent's instinctive reaction, a thumb flicking to go live when she saw an officer grab a small boy, was now a digital wildfire. On the screen, Micah's small frame crumpled under the orange stream of pepper spray. The sound, the ragged, tearing scream of an 11-year-old cut deeper than the image. The footage showed Maddox's voice cold and clipped. "Stop resisting." It showed the boy's hands open, empty, trembling. It showed the cuffs biting into wrists that barely spanned 5 centimeters. By 6 p.m., the live stream had crossed 3 million views on multiple platforms: Instagram, TikTok, X, and YouTube Shorts, spreading from Maple Ridge moms group chats to DC journalists to West Coast activists in barely 90 minutes. The hashtag Justice for Micah had erupted from 0 to #1 nationally by 6/21, outpacing even celebrity gossip trends. Comment sections flooded in real time. "He's a child. Why is an 11-year-old treated like a threat? This could have been my son." But interspersed were the other kind, the ones Ava had predicted, with cold precision. "We don't know the whole story. Maybe he did something. Cops don't just spray kids for no reason." The polarization calcified faster than anyone expected. By 7 p.m., Maple Ridge itself had become a live battlefield of narrative. The town's main news affiliate, Channel 7 Metro, opened its broadcast with a sympathetic interview of the mother who filmed the incident, her voice shaking as she described watching the boy collapse. They played the video twice, uncut warning for disturbing images. Their anchor said the words "racial profiling on air" once softly, then again louder, as if testing if it would stick. Meanwhile, Channel 4 Regional, long cozy with local law enforcement, aired a polished statement from the Maple Ridge Police Union. Their spokesman, Michael Rourke, a thick-voiced man in his 50s with a flag pin on his lapel, declared Officer Maddox acted within training protocols. He responded to a citizen's call about a suspicious person near children. The subject made a sudden movement toward his waistband. The officer had to make a split-second decision to protect public safety. Channel 4 cut the video into short, jumpy clips, blurring Micah's face, muting his screams, overlaying a timer graphic to emphasize 3.2 seconds of reaction time. They never mentioned his age. They never said 11. On the same screen, 2 realities existed, one of a terrified child, the other of a supposed threat. At 7:23 p.m., the first reporters reached the Lakeside Middle School campus. The principal, Dana Kim, had just gotten off a tense call with the superintendent when her front office assistant rushed in, phone in hand, eyes wide. "It's gone viral," she whispered. Kim walked to the library where after-school club advisors were finishing paperwork and quietly asked the dozen remaining teachers to gather. The smell of dry erase markers and faint printer toner hung in the air, suddenly sour. "Micah Pierce was involved in a police incident," Kim said carefully, her voice trying to stay steady. "You're going to see it online. You might have already. He's hurt, but stable. His parents are with him." A gasp escaped one teacher. Another muttered, "That sweet kid from coding club." Kim nodded. "We need to prepare for tomorrow. Students will be emotional. There will be media outside. Please emphasize that everyone deserves support right now. No child deserves this." By 8 p.m., students had already transformed the story into movement. Micah's classmates had clipped the original live stream into 7-second loops, layering text over it. "He's 11. He was walking home." Would this happen if he were white? They posted them with the same music they used for dances and memes, bright, ironic beats, now carrying grief and fury. Within 40 minutes, the clips had crossed 1 million likes combined. One 8th grader set up a Eder Fido Justice for Micah group chat that gained over 300 members in 2 hours. Screens glowed like beacons all over Maple Ridge that night. Bedrooms, basements, restaurant kitchens, the local Starbucks, even the police precinct's own break room officers watching in silence as their own colleagues' actions became national spectacle. The backlash came just as fast. At 8:35, the Maple Ridge Parents Council posted a statement on Facebook urging calm and patience and warning against rushing to judgment. The top comment read, "We need more patrols near the schools and parks." This wouldn't happen if kids weren't unsupervised. It got 300 likes in 20 minutes. In private chat groups, some parents circulated grainy, zoomed-in stills from the video, claiming they showed Micah reaching aggressively. They paired them with fear-stoking headlines from Channel 4 about recent break-ins 2 miles away, implying a connection that didn't exist. One anonymous local account tweeted, "Everyone wants to talk about race. No one wants to talk about safety. Back the blue." It was retweeted over 5,000 times. At 9:11 p.m., CNN ran the story. Then MSNBC. Then the Washington Post pushed a breaking banner. Video shows officer pepper spraying 11-year-old in affluent suburb. By 10, Fox News had joined, but their framing was fire and gasoline. A guest from a police training nonprofit declared, "This is the kind of second-guessing that gets officers killed. If they hesitate, they don't go home." The National Echo Chamber was fully engaged. At 10:15 p.m., Principal Kim called an emergency staff meeting for 6:30 a.m. the next morning. She knew the school would become the story's next flashpoint. Some families would show up demanding justice. Others would show up demanding protection from the very boy who needed it. Already emails were pouring in from parents. "I don't want my child sitting next to him until we know what really happened. Micah is a sweet kid. This is horrifying. Why was an FBI official's kid walking home alone?" The contradictions burned. In the Pierce household, now under quiet FBI protective watch, Ava sat at the dining room table, surrounded by open laptops and legal pads, her phone buzzing constantly. She was drafting simultaneous documents: a federal civil rights complaint, a tort claim notice, a request for DOJ oversight. On another screen, social media scrolled like a heartbeat monitor, jagged with rage and grief. 3.6 million views murmured their daughter Layla, 16, from the couch. She was refreshing TikTok every 30 seconds. It's on everyone's FYP. People are posting his school picture. Some of them are crying on camera. Some are saying he made it up. Langston, standing by the window with his tie loosened, said nothing. He watched 2 news vans idling on their quiet cul-de-sac, their camera masts raised against the night sky like accusing fingers. Layla whispered, It's like they either want to hug him or destroy him. There's no in-between. By midnight, the polarization had hardened into two camps. One side posted Micah's smiling school portrait beside the video of his screaming, captioned, "This is what they see as a threat." The other side posted Maddox's Academy graduation photo badge, polished, captioned, "He was protecting our kids." Comment wars raged past 4,000 replies per thread. Anonymous threats began leaking into Ava's firm's email inbox. A parent claimed the family was using race to cash in. Another said, "Back off the cops or you'll regret it." And still the number climbed. 6.8 million views by 1:15 a.m., 9.2 million by 2:40. Maple Ridge had become a symbol. Micah had become a fault line. By the time dawn began bleeding pale light over the lawns at 5:58 a.m., the world had decided it had an opinion about an 11-year-old boy who had simply walked home through a park. The town he called home would never see him the same way again. At 7:42 a.m., while reporters clustered like vultures on the front steps of Lakeside Middle School, and students whispered, they pepper-sprayed Micah in voices that trembled between anger and awe. Assistant Director Micah Pierce walked through the steel-framed glass entrance of the J. Edgar Hoover building with a face so calm it looked carved from stone. He had slept maybe 90 minutes, suit-pressed shoes, sharp beard lined, like he was heading to a Senate hearing instead of trying to keep his heart from detonating. He scanned his badge past the security gates and took the elevator 12 floors down to the Bureau's Civil Rights Division. There, he did something that cost him more than any operational loss ever had. He formally recused himself from the investigation into the Maple Ridge Police Department. "I am the father of the victim," he said, voice clipped, but clear as the ethics officer typed his declaration into the system. "I will provide information, but exercise no operational control." When he signed the form, the pen pressed hard enough to etch the words into the desk blotter beneath. Outside the glass partition, Deputy Director Monica Alvarez was waiting. 53 years old, small-framed but unshakable, she had clawed her way up from patrol work in El Paso to become the first Latina to head the Bureau's Civil Rights Division. Her dark hair was pulled tight, her suit charcoal, her expression already sharpened to the edge of war. "Walk with me," she said. By 8 o'clock, they were in a secure SCF conference room, 6 analysts already at work around the table, screens awash in spreadsheets, arrest logs and scanned policy manuals from the Maple Ridge Police Department. The air smelled of printer heat and burnt coffee. Alvarez spoke without looking up from her laptop. "Preliminary pull of their stop data 5 years," she said. "Population of Maple Ridge is 12% black. But black residents are 7 times more likely to be stopped than white residents, 13 times more likely to experience use of force." She tapped a key, and the numbers bloomed on the wall screen bars like iron bars, red stacked against pale blue. Langston's hands clenched at his sides. He had suspected this, but suspicion was fog. Numbers were concrete. Numbers could bury people. Alvarez continued, voice as steady as the ticking wall clock. "Officers report furtive movements as justification in 59% of stops involving black residents, but only 6% of stops involving whites. No definition of furtive. No supervisory review." "Open season," Langston murmured. "Effectively," Alvarez said. Another analyst, Kendra Ung, swiveled her chair around, glasses flashing. "We're also flagging unusual patterns in arrest geography. 81% of discretionary arrests come from just 4 census tracts. They call them priority zones." Langston frowned. "Maple Ridge doesn't have high crime zones." "Exactly," Kendra said. "Crime rates in those tracts are average or below. But arrests are off the charts." Alvarez finally looked at him. "And guess where Willowbrook Park sits?" Right on the border, Langston said, his voice sinking like stone. By 9:17 a.m., the probe went public. The Bureau issued a rare statement, confirming that the Civil Rights Division had opened a preliminary investigation into the use of force and racial bias patterns within the Maple Ridge Police Department. News tickers lit up FBI launches civil rights probe after viral video of 11-year-old. Inside the department's red brick headquarters on Sycamore Avenue, panic bloomed like mold. Captain Douglas Vance barked at subordinates to pull every body cam clip from the last 90 days. Officers muttered about witch hunts and political theater in the locker room. Someone taped a new Blue Lives Matter flag over the break room TV. Someone else quietly removed their nameplate from the hallway wall. Maddox sat silent in an interview room, arms crossed, jaw set like rebar. He had been placed on administrative leave badge and guns surrendered, though his police union rep had told him, "We've got you. Just stay quiet." But cracks were already forming in the wall of silence. At 10:54 a.m., an encrypted tip landed in Alvarez's secure inbox. The sender was anonymous. The subject line, just 3 words: "Follow the money." Inside was a spreadsheet, rows of officer names, dates, arrest counts, and dollar amounts. The file name, productivity, bonus, 3.xlsx. Alvarez's eyes narrowed. "Where the hell did this come from?" Kendra muttered. "No metadata," Alvarez said. "But if it's real..." They cross-checked names. Maddox appeared 12 times payouts, ranging from $500 to $3,000. Each payout was tagged to arrests made in the so-called priority zones. Langston felt the air shift in the room the same way it shifted when you realized a suspect's alibi had just cracked wide open. "This isn't just bias," Alvarez said, her voice low-measured. "This is incentive. They're getting paid to target people." By 11:30 a.m., Alvarez had signed emergency subpoenas for the department's internal financial records and communications. A Bureau cyber unit began mirroring their servers remotely, while the department scrambled to contain the leak. Inside the mirrored data, more damning clues emerged. Hidden email chains, off-the-books slush funds labeled community enforcement initiatives, private group chats where officers referred to certain streets as clean-up corridors. One message from Vance to Maddox read, "Need 2 more quality arrests this month to hit your Q2 bonus. Priority Zone B is low." "Quality arrests," Langston repeated, voice flat. "They mean black bodies." Alvarez didn't disagree. At 12:48 p.m., the data analysis team delivered a shockwave. In the last 3 years, Maple Ridge officers had made 142 arrests in the 4 priority zones. Over 91% involved Black or Latino residents, despite those groups making up less than 20% of the town. Force had been used in 38% of those arrests, more than 6 times the department's rate in white-majority areas. And the kicker, officers assigned to patrol the priority zones had the fastest promotion rates in the department. The incentives weren't accidental. They were engineered. By 2:15 p.m., Alvarez briefed Director Holloway behind closed doors. "This is systemic," she said bluntly. "Not just one rogue cop. They built a machine to turn minority residents into statistics, then into cash." Holloway sat back grim. "And they hit the wrong kid this time." "No," Alvarez said, eyes flicking to Langston, who stood silent by the wall. "They hit the right kid. The one with a father who knows exactly how to dismantle them." By 3 p.m., word of the FBI subpoenas had leaked. Local media melted down in real time. Channel 7 Metro ran a banner, "FBI investigating secret bonus scheme." Channel 4 Regional, desperate to blunt the impact, ran a simultaneous piece calling it routine performance stipends, but their anchors' voices faltered on air. Students at Lakeside Middle watched on phones under their desks. One kid whispered, "They were getting paid to arrest people like him." By 3:45, parents flooded the school's office line, demanding answers, half furious that their town had a secret racial bounty system, half furious that the FBI was attacking our police. Meanwhile, inside the bureau, Alvarez's team kept pulling threads, and every thread came up rotten. A hidden ledger showed that the so-called Productivity Bonus Fund had been seeded with $480,000 skimmed from civil asset forfeitures. Emails showed city finance officers quietly approving community grant reallocations that funneled the money into the fund while keeping it off the public books. And deep in the group chats, officers joked about racking up numbers in Zone B before the feds catch on. Langston stood at the edge of the operations room, silent hands clasped behind his back, every inch of him the stoic federal officer, but inside the father in him was a roaring fire. They hadn't just hurt his boy. They had built a system designed to find boys like his mark, then grind them into arrest stats, and call it performance. At 6:11 p.m., Alvarez convened the full task force. "This isn't about just Maddox anymore," she told them. "This is about the bones of the Maple Ridge Police Department. We're not just going to expose it, we're going to dismantle it." The room went still, and somewhere in a locked evidence drawer just down the hall from where Micah had screamed, a flash drive waited full of payout logs, arrest maps, and private jokes that would turn a small-town scandal into a national reckoning. At 7:28 a.m., the morning after the FBI's civil rights probe detonated across every news feed, Sergeant Lena Ortiz sat alone in her patrol car on the far side of the Maple Ridge Municipal Garage engine, off windows fogged breathing as if she'd just finished a mile sprint. The rain had started overnight, fine as mist coating everything in a gray film that made the town look like a paused video. Ortiz gripped her phone so hard her knuckles whitened. She had spent 14 years in the Maple Ridge Police Department, rising from rookie to training sergeant, surviving the locker room culture, by keeping her head down, working twice as hard, and never flinching. But what she had seen over those 14 years, the whispered quotas, the quiet edits to body cam clips, the envelopes of cash passed off as community stipends, was now burning her alive from the inside. She had known about the Neighborhood Integrity Program from the start. They'd called it NIP in the station hallways, always with smirks, always off record. It was supposed to incentivize proactive policing in at-risk corridors, but everyone knew what it really meant. Black and brown faces equaled points, points equaled payouts. Ortiz had ignored it as long as she could, telling herself she could protect people from the inside. But seeing an 11-year-old boy blind and screaming while her colleagues called it good protocol had shattered something she hadn't even realized was fragile. At 7:32, she hit send on the encrypted message she had drafted all night, her thumb trembling just once. To Deputy Director Monica Alvarez, FBI Civil Rights Division. Subject Whistleblower NIP message. We've been running a cash incentive system called the Neighborhood Integrity Program. It's off books. Arrests in designated priority zones earn payouts from a forfeiture slush fund. Body cam uploads are edited before submission. Reports are rewritten to match desired narratives. I can prove it. Please advise safe channel. Sergeant Lena Ortiz. She stared at the screen after sending it the word delivered glowing like a detonator light. By 9:11 a.m., Ortiz sat in a beige-walled safe interview room 2 floors underground at the Hoover Building, her badge and service weapon locked away upstairs. Alvarez entered with 2 bureau attorneys and a note-taker, her eyes sharp but steady, like a surgeon about to cut. Sergeant Ortiz Alvarez said, voice, "Even what you tell us today could end careers, or end yours, if it's not backed by proof. Do you understand that?" "I do," Ortiz said. Her voice was low but steady. "And I have the proof. Over the next 73 minutes, Ortiz unpacked 14 years of buried rot. She described how the Neighborhood Integrity Program had been launched 6 years ago under Captain Warren Hale, with quiet approval from City Manager Greg Fulton. Officially, the bonuses came from community enforcement grants. In reality, the money came from civil asset forfeitures. Cars, cash, even homes seized. During drug raids, many never returned, even when charges were dropped. Fulton had funneled that seized money into a discretionary community improvement line item, which Hale then distributed to officers who hit productivity targets in the 4 priority zones. Each arrest earned points 1 point for misdemeanors, 3 for felonies, 5 for quality. Arrests a vague term that supervisors defined however they wanted. Officers who hit 20 points in a quarter got cash payouts ranging from $500 to $3,000. Hale kept a shadow spreadsheet in his private cloud folder tracking each officer's totals. Ortiz had seen it. She described how Assistant District Attorney James Larkin was part of the loop fast-tracking cases from those zones to guarantee convictions, so the arrests would count. Larkin had bragged at a holiday party, whiskey loose on his tongue, that he had a pipeline deal with Hale. You give me clean charges, I give you quick wins. And the body cams. That was the part that made Alvarez's jaw tighten. Officers uploaded footage at the end of each shift, but supervisors had private access codes allowing them to trim for relevance before clips went to prosecutors. In practice, that meant cutting out the 30 seconds before a stop, the parts that showed officers profiling, escalating, provoking. They left only the moments of alleged resistance. Ortiz had watched one of her own stops get rewritten this way. Her calm approach clipped her partner's shove, erased only the suspect's angry flinch left intact. They told us it was about narrative discipline, Ortiz said quietly, that the department survives by controlling the story before the story controls us. Who told you that? Alvarez asked. Captain Hale Ortiz said, exact words. At 10:56 a.m., Ortiz slid a thin black USB drive across the table. This is a full download of Hale's shadow spreadsheet. He kept it on a password-protected folder labeled Training Metrics. I copied it 2 months ago when I made up my mind to leave. Alvarez opened the files. There it was, row after row, of names, arrest dates, charges, conviction status, and dollar amounts. Maddox's name appeared 27 times over the last 3 years, with payouts totaling $18,750. Hale had added notes besides some solid numbers. Good zone coverage, and once chillingly, keeping them in check. At the bottom of the spreadsheet, approved by GF, Greg Fulton Alvarez said flatly. Ortiz nodded. By 1:14 p.m., the Bureau had executed sealed warrants on the Maple Ridge City server and the county prosecutor's email system. The digital forensics team found Larkin's messages to Hale. Got your 3 cases from Zone C. I'll push them to quick plea deals. Gotta keep your stats clean. And later tell Maddox to write his report tighter. I can't sell it to the judge if it sounds like profiling. In a hidden server backup, they found the original body cam files from multiple priority zone arrests, unedited copies showing stops of black residents for things like walking too slowly, pausing near vehicles, furtive glances. In almost all the official versions, those opening minutes were missing. One file showed Maddox stopping a 16-year-old boy who had been eating Skittles on a park bench. Maddox's approach was aggressive from the start. "What are you doing here?" The boy, confused, stood too quickly. Maddox grabbed his arm and forced him down. The official version started only from that grab, captioned "resisting." Alvarez shut her laptop with quiet finality. "This isn't just misconduct," she said. "This is organized civil rights fraud." By 4:22 p.m., word reached the Maple Ridge PD. Someone had leaked that a sergeant had turned whistleblower. The hallways went arctic. Officers glared at each other in silence. Maddox cursed under his breath in the break room. Captain Hale locked his office door for 3 hours, emerging only to bark. "No one talks to the feds without me present." By 5:30, City Manager Greg Fulton was spotted hurrying into the county administration building with 2 lawyers and a stack of binders clutched like a life vest. And by 6:15, ADA James Larkin released a preemptive statement claiming the FBI was mischaracterizing routine prosecutorial prioritization and that he had no knowledge of any bonus structure tied to arrests. Inside the Bureau's SCF, Alvarez read it without expression and dropped it on the table. "He's lying," she said. Langston, who had stayed silent through most of the debrief, spoke at last. "And now he's afraid." At 7:08 p.m., Alvarez's team mapped the full structure on a whiteboard. Neighborhood Integrity Program. Captain Warren Hale created NIP-controlled bonus spreadsheet. City Manager Greg Fulton funded bonuses through hidden forfeiture funds. ADA James Larkin fast-tracked cases, coached officers on how to write reports. Multiple officers, including Maddox's top producers, rewarded for targeting priority zones. Supervisors trimmed body cam clips to fit narratives. The lines of the diagram crisscrossed like a spider web. Money arrests, convictions, promotions, each thread gleaming with corruption. Ortiz stood in the corner of the room, arms folded, gaze steady. "They told us the wall protects everyone inside it," she said quietly. "But it only protects the ones doing the damage." Alvarez met her eyes. Not anymore. By 9:29 p.m., Ortiz had been moved to protective housing under Bureau watch. The FBI prepared sealed indictments. Journalists buzzed on social media about internal fractures at the Maple Ridge PD, though they didn't yet know how deep the crack ran. And as Langston stepped out into the cool night air of D.C., the city glowing low and amber beyond the Hoover Building's glass, he realized something electric and terrifying. The blue wall wasn't just cracking. It was beginning to fall. At 6:43 a.m., the Pierce household sat in a silence so taut it felt like glass. Outside the Maple Ridge cul-de-sac was already buzzing with satellite trucks and reporters clutching steaming paper cups, their breath fogging in the early chill. A boom mic hovered at the end of the driveway like a waiting predator. Inside the kitchen smelled of toast. No one was eating. Ava Pierce sat at the table with her laptop open, glasses perched low on her nose, her perfectly pressed navy blazer at odds with the dark half-moons under her eyes. Langston Pierce, still in his white dress shirt from the night before, stood by the window with his tie-loosened arms folded. And Micah, 11 years old, still bearing faint reddish marks on his wrists, sat between them on a stool with his feet not quite reaching the floor, clutching a warm mug of tea he hadn't touched. On the screen was the offer. $2 million now, or $4 million if they accepted confidentiality clauses. It had arrived just after midnight from the city attorney's office, delivered through their law firm, with the sterile tone of a bank transaction. Along with the money came promises, a formal public apology from the mayor, the resignation of Officer Trevor Maddox, effective immediately, and a vague commitment to internal reviews of use of force protocols. The catch, a non-disclosure agreement so airtight it might as well have been a vault. They would be barred from discussing the Neighborhood Integrity Program, from mentioning the FBI investigation, from testifying about systemic misconduct. No interviews, no press, no public testimony. In exchange for silence, they would receive security comfort escape. It was the clean exit, the easy out. The city's white flag strategy, buy the truth, before it could burn them. Micah stared at the number on the screen like it was a math problem. $4 million, he said softly, as if tasting the words. That's like 4,000 laptops, Layla murmured from the corner, her 16-year-old sarcasm muted by fatigue. She was curled up on the couch with a blanket hair tangled from a sleepless night of scrolling news feeds. Micah's brow furrowed. If we take it, does that mean Maddox just leaves? Like he can just be a cop somewhere else? Ava closed her laptop with a quiet click. Yes, she said, and the word landed like a stone. He'd resign. There would be no official finding of misconduct on his record. He could apply to another department. They wouldn't even know what he did to you. Micah's lips pressed into a thin line, his small shoulders stiffening. Then someone else's kid could get hurt. Langston exhaled slow and sharp, like letting air out of a tire before it burst. He had spent his life mastering the art of compartmentalization, sealing pain behind glass, to function in war zones and federal courtrooms. But here now his son had pierced it with one quiet sentence. Ava reached for Micah's hand, her voice soft but steady. You're thinking like an attorney. I'm thinking like a brother, Micah said, eyes flicking toward Layla. Like if it was her. By 7:29 a.m., they were all in the study, blinds drawn the walls lined with legal books Ava had once sworn she'd never use for personal wars. On the desk lay two piles, one the city's settlement documents crisp and thick with promises, the other Ava's draft federal civil rights complaint under 42 U.S.C., paragraph 1983, pages sharp as razors. Langston stood behind her, reading over her shoulder as she typed. His jaw was tight enough to ache. This will make us targets, he said finally. We already are, Ava replied without looking up. At least this way we choose the battlefield. Layla had drifted in silently, phone clutched in her hand. You know what people are saying online? They think we'll take the money. That this is just a payday. Some of them are calling Micah a prop. Her voice cracked on the last word. Micah straightened his small frame, trembling but unbroken. I don't want the money. I want people to know what they did. Ava stopped typing. Her hands hovered over the keyboard like suspended birds. She turned slowly, studying her son, as if seeing him through new light. He looked impossibly young in his faded Star Wars t-shirt, yet his eyes held a gravity that made her chest ache. Then that's what we'll do, she said. At 8:45 a.m., Ava placed a call to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, her voice sliding into its courtroom register, measured lethal. She informed them she would be filing a formal federal civil rights lawsuit against the Maple Ridge Police Department and referring all evidence from the Neighborhood Integrity Program for immediate criminal review. At 9:22, she filed an official declination of the city's settlement offer through her firm, marking the box labeled Refused NDA Conditions Inconsistent with Public Interest. The city attorney called her cell at 9:31, voice sharp with disbelief. Mrs. Pierce, with respect, this is the largest settlement we've ever offered. It's enough to silence us, Ava cut in calm as a blade. And no amount is enough for that. She hung up before he could respond. By 10:12 a.m., Langston entered the Hoover building and walked the long slate hallway to Deputy Director Monica Alvarez's office. He was still recused from the investigation, but Alvarez had requested a personal update. She looked up from a wall of evidence boards as he entered. Did they make an offer? $4 million, Langston said. Alvarez's brow arched, and he met her gaze, voice iron flat. We declined. Ava's filing the federal suit. The DOJ gets everything. For the first time in days, Alvarez allowed the corner of her mouth to tilt upward. Then this might actually change something. By noon, the press had the story. The Pierces reject settlement file federal civil rights lawsuit, blazed across banners from CNN to the Washington Post. Local channels scrambled some, calling it courageous, others sneering about grandstanding. Channel 4 Regional framed it as politically motivated, their anchor warning that lawsuits undermine public confidence in law enforcement. Channel 7 Metro called it a historic stand against systemic abuse, interviewing civil rights lawyers who compared the move to landmark cases like Brown versus Board. Within 2 hours, the hashtag Pierce's Refuse hit the national trending board. In the afternoon sun slanting across their living room, reporters' voices rose from the street outside. Layla stood by the window, peering through the curtain. "They're chanting your name," she whispered to Micah. Micah didn't answer. He sat at the table with Ava, signing the plaintiff's verification page in blocky 11-year-old handwriting, the letters uneven from his still stiff wrists. When he finished, he looked up at his mother. "If we lose, will it be like it didn't happen?" Ava shook her head. "If we lose, it will still be on record. The evidence will still be public. Everyone will know the truth. That matters more than winning." Micah nodded once, solemn. "Then let's do it." By 4:18 p.m., the complaint hit the federal docket. Pierce et al. V. City of Maple Ridge et al. The filing named Officer Trevor Maddox, Captain Warren Hale, City, Manager Greg Fulton, ADA James Larkin, and the Maple Ridge Police Department as defendants. It cited violations of the 4th and 14th Amendments, pattern and practice racial discrimination and conspiracy under 18 U.S.C. Part 241. At 5:03, the DOJ's Civil Rights Division confirmed receipt of Ava's referral package, including Ortiz's whistleblower evidence, the bonus spreadsheets, and the edited body cam archives. By 5:40, the Maple Ridge City Council had gone into emergency closed session. Aides whispered about crisis communications and legal exposure in the tens of millions. That night, at 9:27 p.m., Langston stood on the back deck staring into the dark woods behind their house, the night thick with the smell of wet leaves. Ava joined him, 2 mugs of chamomile in her hands. "Are you scared?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he admitted. "And certain," she nodded. "Me too." Through the window behind them, Micah sat curled on the couch beside Layla, the soft blue glow of a tablet lighting his face. He looked impossibly small and impossibly steady. The easy path had been laid before them in neat, expensive lines. Money apology, quiet. They had set it on fire, and somewhere in the distance the first cracks of panic were echoing through the marble halls, where Maple Ridge's power had once felt untouchable. At 9:06 a.m., the second-floor courtroom of the federal building on North Lexington hummed with the low voltage of anticipation reporters in the back row, law clerks along the wall, camera crews banished to the corridor. The case caption glowed on the monitor like a challenge: Pierce et al. V. City of Maple Ridge et al. When Judge Evelyn Carr took the bench 60 precise, the kind of jurist who treats adjectives as contraband, the room straightened into attention. First order of business: the defendant's motion to dismiss on qualified immunity. Counsel for the city spoke of split-second judgments of evolving threats of officer safety. Carr listened, one finger on her notes, then raised her gaze. "I have watched the unedited, body-worn camera files, the dispatch logs, and the civilian video. The record at this stage, viewed in the light most favorable to the plaintiffs, plausibly alleges a violation of clearly established law." The gavel's soft tap at 9:31 was a thunderclap motion denied. By 10:12 a.m., the jury had been sworn, and the story began to spool in under oath. The government's first exhibit stitched time to truth, a multi-angle sync dispatch audio at 0000 neighbor live stream at 0013, Maddox's body cam at 0021, and park security footage at 0018, locked to a single timeline, so the defense couldn't stretch seconds into excuses. You could see it cleanly now. Micah, 11 years, 1.45 meters tall, walking at roughly 4 km/h. The patrol car arriving 2 minutes 53 seconds after the 911 call. Maddox closing distance to within 0.5 meters before issuing a clear command. The OC spray deployed 0.9 seconds after Micah's right hand moved toward his pocket. The cuffs ratcheted in under 5 seconds on wrists barely 5 centimeters around. Split second wasn't a mystery anymore. It was a choice with a timestamp. Then came Micah. At 10:48, he took the stand in a navy sweater. Small hands folded, voice steady, the way a string is steady on a tuned violin. He told the story without decoration. Lakeside Middle School Coding Club, the shortcut through Willowbrook. The first shout, "Stop right there." The instinct to be polite. The line about calling his dad because he knows what to do. The orange burn like fire poured into his eyes, badge 23119, repeating in his head like a metronome, because his father had taught him to memorize numbers before panic could erase them. When the city's attorney tried to needle him, "Is it possible, Micah, that your hand moved quickly toward your waistband?" The boy's answer was simple, unassailable. "I said I was getting my phone. That's what we practiced." I did it slow. The gallery's breath caught. Judge Carr's chin dipped once the smallest acknowledgement of clarity. At 11:29, the defense rolled out their staple, the split-second training frame. A former academy instructor spoke solemnly about time compression, about threat cues, about furtive movements that could get officers killed. He clicked through generic slides. The jurors' eyes glazed. And then the plaintiff's policy expert, Dr. Naomi Feld, took the lectern with a stack of SOPs, the department's own standard operating procedures. In a voice that could cut marble, she read, Section 4.2. 2.1. Chemical agents are not to be used on minors except to prevent imminent harm. Section 3.9. Officers shall allow time for verbal compliance when the subject is not actively resisting. Section 2.5. Drawing to less lethal within arm's length increases risk of blowback and is discouraged. She held up the synced timeline. Officer Maddox was within arm's length. There was no imminent harm. The child was complying verbally. This isn't a split second. This is a deviation. The room felt colder after she finished the way a theater chills when the story's mask drops. After lunch, 1:37 p.m., it was the turn of the numbers. An FBI analyst built a staircase of data the jury could climb with their eyes. Black residents 7x to 13x more likely to be stopped than whites in Maple Ridge. Use of force in the 4 priority zones at 6.3x, the rate of other areas. 1,142 arrests in 3 years, with 91% of arrestees Black or Latino, despite those groups comprising 20% of town population. The last riser on that staircase was money. We traced payments from a forfeiture-funded line item labeled Community Enforcement into off-books productivity bonuses, the analyst said, enlarging a ledger. Officer Trevor Maddox received over $18,000 tied to arrest counts in designated zones. On the screen, the spreadsheet cells glowed $500, $2,000, $750 dozens of entries cascading under Maddox's name. On one line, a note from Captain Warren Hale, 2 more quality arrests this month, Sasri Barnes bonus. The jurors' pens stopped. The defense tried to rally at 2:22 with a PR-glossed narrative bonuses were retention stipends, not bounties. Priority zones were about community engagement, not targets. But Sergeant Lena Ortiz walked that fiction to the edge and pushed it off. Under oath, she described the Neighborhood Integrity Program, the hush-hush launch 6 years prior. The point system, 1 for misdemeanors, 3 for felonies, 5 for so-called quality arrests, the envelopes of cash, the promotion pipeline greased with numbers. She told them about trimmed body cam uploads, how supervisors clipped the 30 seconds that showed escalation and left only the flinch. About the standing order to control the narrative. About the morning she watched an 11-year-old scream on a video and could no longer pretend the wall she'd served was protection, not concealment. At 3:09, the second insider arrived, where the blue wall used to be Ryan Cho, a soft-spoken civilian IT administrator for Maple Ridge PD hands, folded like he wished they weren't his. He confirmed the post-incident message scrubs the metadata anomalies on March 18th between 4:13 and 4:19 p.m. A burst of 28 by the twin. Scientific deletions from a supervisor's group chat, titled Ops Shield. He produced the backup he had quietly routed to off-site mirroring before anyone told him not to. The screen filled with the words, "The defense wished never existed. Delete anything about the kid's age. Say, reached fast for waistband. Trim the pre-approach." In the back row, a reporter's pen snapped. By 4:45, the city's legal team was no longer presenting. They were triaging. Every new witness opened another artery. The finance officer who testified about the $480,000 slush seeded from civil asset forfeitures. The assistant DA's email, James Larkin, nudging cleaner reports to sell it to the judge. The promotion board minutes, praising proactive numbers in Zone B. The courtroom's oxygen thinned into inevitability. The pivot came the next morning, 9:16 a.m., just as Ava Pierce began to outline remedies in closing. Counsel for the city, Rose requested a sidebar, then a recess. When court reconvened at 10:04, the city's lead attorney stood as if walking into weather. "Your Honor," she said, voice tight, "the city of Maple Ridge will enter into a consent decree with the United States for a term of 5 years under an independent monitor acceptable to DOJ and this court. Effective immediately termination with decertification of Officer Trevor Maddox. Resignation of Captain Warren Hale. Referrals to state and federal authorities for potential criminal charges up the chain. Mandatory body cam retention protocols with civilian oversight. Early warning analytics for biased policing. And comprehensive training consistent with the SOPs introduced at trial." A sound moved through the gallery that was half gasp, half exhale. Judge Carr peered over her glasses. "Decertification entered with the state post board?" she asked. "Yes, Your Honor. Independent monitor filed within 30 days. Yes. Quarterly public reports. Yes." She turned to the jury with a grave nod. "Ladies and gentlemen, your service has made this possible." At 10:28, the clerk read the terms into the record, while Micah watched from the front row, feet barely brushing the marble. He didn't understand every acronym, but he understood decertification, that the man who burned his eyes couldn't simply move to another county and do it again. He understood resignation, that the captain who built the bonus machine was leaving in disgrace. He understood referrals that truth now carried teeth. And he understood something else, as he looked at his mother's steady hands and his father's unblinking stare. They hadn't taken the easy money. They had taken the long road to a door that opened. The reckoning the Pierces had chosen, when they said no to hush money, had become a blueprint under the seal of the court, 5 years of sunlight, an independent witness baked into the city's future, a promise that seconds would no longer be weaponized into myths. When the gavel fell at 10:41 a.m., the sound didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the first precise click of a mechanism finally built to work. At 6:28 a.m., 6 months after the gavel fell in Judge Carr's courtroom, the Maple Ridge Police Department's headquarters stood almost unrecognizable still, the same red brick facade on Sycamore Avenue, but the energy inside had shifted, like the first breath after a storm breaks. Gone were the old brass nameplates, Captain Warren Hale, Lieutenant Cole Avery, Sergeant Brent Maddox, scrubbed from the walls and replaced with a slate-gray board of new leadership, Chief Marisol Vega, a reform-minded veteran from Seattle, and Deputy Chief Arjun Desai, an internal candidate chosen by a civilian hiring panel for his record of community outreach. The old command staff had been peeled away in layers over the summer, some quietly resigning, others retiring under the shadow of investigation. By August, over 42% of supervisory positions had turned over. What had once been a fortress now felt like an institution under public oath. The changes weren't just cosmetic. Beginning July 1st, every patrol officer had been issued Axon X5 body cameras with continuous loop recording and a minimum 180-day cloud retention monitored not by the department's IT staff, but by a 5-member civilian review board that met weekly on the 3rd floor. The board, 3 community members, 1 retired judge, and 1 high school senior watched random samples of footage every Friday, 50 clips at a time, flagging any hint of misconduct. The new policy mandated that if footage disappeared, so did the officer's badge automatic suspension, no exceptions. By August, the department had also implemented the Transparent Stop Dashboard, a public-facing website updated nightly with raw stop data, time, location, reason, race, age, outcome. Anyone in Maple Ridge could now see in clean blue charts who was being stopped on their streets. And the numbers themselves had shifted. Stops of black residents, which once ran 7 to 13 times higher than whites, dropped by over 62% in just the first quarter of oversight. Inside the new training wing, once the captain's private gym, recruits now sat cross-legged on mats during audited implicit bias seminars run by outside experts, while veteran officers cycled through quarterly ethics certifications signed off by the Federal Monitor. The old warrior mindset posters were gone, replaced with the department's new motto on every wall, "Guardian First." And for the first time in its 78-year history, Maple Ridge PD had created a youth liaison unit, 5 unarmed officers tasked not with enforcement, but with mentorship. Every middle and high school in town now had a dedicated liaison who spent 10 hours per week on campus coaching, sports, attending clubs, helping students navigate conflicts. Their first assignment back in September had been Lakeside Middle School, where Micah still walked the same halls, this time not as a silent survivor, but as the reason the walls themselves felt safer. While Maple Ridge reshaped itself from the inside out, Assistant Director Micah Pierce was reshaping the system from above. From his corner office on the 12th floor of the J. Edgar Hoover Building windows, framing the marble dome of the Capitol in the distance, he spearheaded what the Bureau now called the Pierce Protocol, a national early warning program designed to catch discriminatory policing patterns before they metastasized. At 9:04 a.m. on a brisk October morning, he stood before a conference room of 56 field division chiefs and outlined the system with his usual surgeon's calm, an integrated database pulling real-time stop-and-force data from over 1,200 departments, cross-referencing race, age, and geography against local demographics and crime rates. Any department showing disparities beyond 2.5 standard deviations from expected patterns would trigger an automatic civil rights review flag, sending analysts, not SWAT teams, into precincts to audit protocols and training. This isn't punishment, Langston told them, his voice level but resonant. It's prevention. So no other 11-year-old has to become a federal case before someone notices. The first pilot phase launched across 7 states, and within 3 months it had already flagged 19 departments for early disparities, prompting reforms without lawsuits, protests, or viral videos. The program was slated for national rollout by the following spring. Internally, the Bureau had nicknamed it Project Willowbrook, after the park where everything had gone wrong, and then, in a way, right. And Micah, once the boy at the center of it all, was no longer just the subject of headlines. At 3:17 p.m., in a sunlit second-floor room of the rebuilt Maple Ridge Community Center, he stood before 22 kids between ages 10 and 14, a half-smile tugging at his mouth as they tested out the budgeting app he'd built back before his world cracked. Behind him, A banner hung across the wall in clean blue type Pierce Youth Rights and Code Initiative. It had started with just his old coding club friends. In July, 3 laptops, 2 beanbags, and a whiteboard scrawled with "Know Your Rights" in block letters. But word spread fast. By October, the initiative had grown into a full nonprofit with $240,000 in seed funding from civil rights organizations, a part-time staff of 8 mentors, and weekly workshops that braided together civic literacy and tech skills. In one corner, kids coded apps to track their spending or map safe walking routes. In another, they practiced calm verbal scripts for police encounters, role-playing both the fear and the composure. Micah had insisted on one rule: every kid leaves with something built and something understood. At 4:02 p.m., a girl named Aisha stood and presented her project, a colorful budgeting game, and then, without prompting, recited her rights if stopped by an officer. "Stay calm, keep my hands visible, ask if I'm free to leave, and if not, ask for a lawyer." The room burst into applause. Micah caught his mother's gaze from the back row, Ava, now serving on the state's Police Reform Commission. Her once sharp courtroom edges softened into pride. And his father's from the doorway, his suit jacket folded over one arm badge gleaming faintly under the autumn light. Later, while the last kids trickled out, one of the mentors whispered, "You know you could have walked away from all of this. No one would have blamed you." Micah thought about that, about the offer, the hush money, the clean escape they didn't take, about the moment he'd said, "Then someone else's kid could get hurt," and watched his parents' faces shift like tectonic plates. He looked at the empty beanbags, the glowing monitors, the posters of kids who looked like him and were no longer afraid to. "I did walk away," he said quietly, "just not alone." By 6:49 p.m., the sun had dropped below the oaks outside Willowbrook Park, painting the grass gold. Micah walked the path where it had happened, the cold October air threading through his jacket. The playground nearby rang with laughter, kids of every shade chasing each other across the same ground, where he once lay screaming. At the edge of the park now stood a small bronze plaque, installed just last week by the city council. "In honor of courage. To Micah Pierce, whose voice changed our city. May no child ever fear walking home." He stood before it for a long moment, hands in his pockets, then smiled a real, unguarded smile, the kind he hadn't felt in over a year. Because here now, the system that had failed him was learning to protect. Because his trauma had become not an anchor but a lighthouse. Because somewhere tonight a child would be stopped, and this time the officer would pause. Remember the training, remember the oversight, and simply say, "Have a good night, kid," and the child would keep walking. 6 months after the courtroom gavel echoed at 10:41 in the morning, Maple Ridge had transformed from a cautionary tale into a living blueprint, and in that transformation lies a lesson every American citizen needs to hear. A police department that once hid behind a blue wall now stands under 5 full years of federal oversight. Every officer wearing body cams reviewed weekly by 5 civilian monitors, every stop logged on a public dashboard, updated every 24 hours. What changed this wasn't luck. It was choice by one family who refused a hush money settlement of $4 million and instead chose accountability. And that choice matters to all of us because it shows how courage at the scale of a single household can ripple through an entire system. For too long we've been told that injustice is inevitable, that the machine can't be moved. But in just 6 months, Maple Ridge cut racially biased stops by 62%, rewrote training manuals, and replaced 42% of its command staff with leaders vetted by the community. Those are not symbolic gestures, they are measurable shifts born from public pressure, legal action, and relentless truth-telling. And while Assistant Director Langston Pierce, now runs a national early warning system from the 12th floor of the J. Edgar Hoover Building, flagging biased policing before it escalates. His son Micah, just 11 years old when he was attacked, has built something equally revolutionary, the Pierce Youth Rights and Code Initiative. Every week, kids as young as 10 walk into that center and leave not only with apps they've coded, but with the knowledge of how to survive and thrive in a system that once saw them as